first off, Seth, thank you so much for
Oh my God,
traveling and flying across the country.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very, very much.
And congratulations on serving 11 terms.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. 11 years of doing the show. It is very strange to me. I did 12 and a half years at SNL, and then I moved down the hallway. And we're coming up on as long at late night as I was at SNL. But I've been very lucky to work in one building for the entirety of a showbiz career. I feel like sometimes like have like a factory job where I've never had to move.
How would you say writing for your show is different than writing for Saturday Night Live?
Well, I think at SNL, especially as a head writer, you try so hard to facilitate sketches for other people's skills. And it took me a while to realize that late night shows only work if you can build it to the skills of the host. So weirdly, it took a few years to realize what we were best at. And we've helpfully been able to refine it over, each day's show. I mean, like one of the hardest things about SNL, which also makes it a fascinating show to watch year in and year out, is, host comes in at SNL and completely changes the DNA of the show. Whereas at the late night show, you are the DNA of the show. So via reps, I feel like the show just keeps getting better. And we certainly still enjoy doing it a great deal.
How would you say the show has evolved over 11 years?
The world, we sort of like talk about the world. So unfortunately, as the world has devolved, we have tried to evolve in concert with that. But, we had a few very interesting things happen. Like a lot of people that had to do shows through the pandemic, we took the show away from the studio. I did the show in an attic for 3 months. And weirdly, doing the show in an attic, albeit for the worst reason possible, was a huge creative awakening for our show because, all of a sudden we didn't have an audience that you had to sort of cater to every night. And we started writing the show we most wanted to watch ourselves. And it turned out, we were lucky enough that there was an audience that came with us when we went through that.
How would you say you've evolved as not only the host, but the showrunner, a showrunner?
I should say, I'm very lucky to have Mike Shoemaker, who's actually here tonight, right over there. He is more a showrunner than I am. I think he has to, that is exactly what he deserved. No, that's too much.
Stand up, Mike.
I love that you said stand up, Mike, and Mike was yelling at everyone else to stand up. This is actually, Mike and I worked together. He was a producer at SNL when I started there, and Mike is incredibly important to just my well-being over the course of a day. Doing a show like mine, like ours, is very stressful, and we have to work very quickly, and yet we have a deep sort of abiding belief that there's nothing gained by like yelling at your staff. There's nothing, it's not worth telling writers like, this is bad. With that said, I go into Shoemaker's office all the time and yell at him and say things like, this is bad. And he's like, I know, go fix it. And then I walk out and I feel better. And so I think, look, it's you can't say never get angry, but I do think we've built this relationship where we try not to get angry in a way that is sort of, destructive to the good vibes we've built up at our show. But he just got knee surgery because he's selfish. And he missed 8 shows. And the amount, he didn't, by the way, all he did was talk to me. He talked to me the way you talk to like a 12-year-old if you're leaving them at home alone for a night. It was like, here's my phone number. Don't eat too many candies. And he missed 8 shows, and on the 8th show, something happened. And I got so frustrated, I threw a pen against the wall, and it exploded, and it looks like a Rorschach ink blot. And Shoemaker's already bought a plaque to put next to it to say, this is what happens when I leave you alone.
So, speaking of all of that and the quickness of which you have to produce all this content, and given the dynamic of the current news cycle, will you share with us some insight about what takes place in your writer's room every day, how you decide what gets written, what makes it to the air, what jokes make it?
It's so nice how little, we have to decide so quickly because of the, ticking clock. And it's so, as a writer who, and again, I'm sure I'm not alone of the writers in the room who tends to procrastinate. It's such a joy to have a ticking clock, and you have to make decisions. But we have a team of people who are writing on monologue jokes only, and they write about 200 jokes to yield the 10 or 12 we have every day. And then we have another writer named Sal Gentile, who's the head writer of sort of our main piece 3 days a week called A Closer Look, which is about 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you very much. I will pass that along to Sal. He deserves it. But Sal turns in a first draft of A Closer Look, and then me and Alex Bays, our head writer, we will take a pass and we will put in jokes. And, obviously we're back to a time that we had gone through, in 4 years ago, which is news is breaking later now all the time. Mm-hmm. We tape our show at 4, and based on the Biden years, I think he might have fully been asleep by 4. Like, there was literally not one piece of breaking news in the entirety of the Biden administration, and it was lovely. I miss it a great deal. But now it's still, we're just chasing it. And, we feel as though we have an understanding with our audience now. If a story breaks late and we don't feel like we can write about it in a way that's thoughtful, we do wait a day, and we feel as though our audience isn't going to watch the show and say, did they not see what happens on the news? I think they know, like, oh, they're going to get to that tomorrow. Now, of course, one of the problems is by tomorrow, that feels like old news. But we do kind of understand that we're living in the same world our audience is, and they don't expect us to say every single thing that happened, because that would be, an hour wouldn't work. Yeah.
And speaking of A Closer Look, you also had the special
Yes.
version of it that aired during the debates.
Yeah, we did it the day after the only presidential debate, which is, the only Harris-Trump debate. And we did a live Closer Look the next day, and it was thrilling. It was in prime time, right? Yeah, it was a primetime show. And the thing about, we tape our show at 4, it airs at 12:30, and we try to do it to time, but obviously there's a lot of leeway to make edits after the show. With the live show, the funniest thing was our script coordinator kept saying, you're 4 minutes short. And then so Sal was just trying to write more. And then based on how the first act went, and this sounds very backdoor braggy, but people laughed so much that it went longer than we thought. And so literally by the end of the first act, it's like, you're 2 minutes long. And so then Sal is pulling out the pages that he's literally just written. And of course, because we are a very analog show and we still use physical cue cards, it was real fun to do a live show where just giant cards were getting flown in the air. And but it was really exciting, and I'm glad both that we did it and that we're not live every night. Yeah.
Which now brings me to another segment that I love, Corrections.
Corrections, thank you.
Okay. So Corrections, by the way, has been nominated 3 times in the category for Outstanding Short Form Comedy, Drama, or Variety Series. Now, I read
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, rolls off the tongue.
The Emmys knows how to name those categories.
Yeah. I read somewhere that you said that Corrections is The Wire, which I don't know how many of you have seen that show.
Yes.
I love that show.
David Simon's,
yes.
Baltimore.
But that you said that it's The Wire of the internet digital short form content.
I said to Emmy voters, don't make Corrections The Wire. And by that I mean 10 years later, you'll be like, I can't believe that show never won an Emmy. Yes, I'm saying right now, Corrections is The Wire of digital short form comedy or drama variety at the Emmys, airing after 9 on a Wednesday.
What is your favorite segment that you wrote from this past season?
What is my favorite? I will say, it was not an accident that we showed Paul Rudd day drinking. And again, right is in quotes on that because, we sort of come up with games that are going to be jumping off points. But for example, we knew we were going to read a scene from Taken, but we did not know where it was going to go. But that is probably, my favorite thing to do because there's so much, I have always identified as a writer first, and so I have this real writer brain about our show, and sometimes it's hard for me to totally sort of let go and be a performer. And day drinking, it turns out if you just pour alcohol on a writer brain, it falls asleep, and then, yeah.
Are there specific talent out there that you sort of think, okay, this person, if they are so willing to come on our show, would be perfect for day drinking? Or how does it? Because when you watch these
interesting that we had Rihanna did it, and post Rihanna, you cannot believe how many people are like down to day drink. And to be honest, the only thing in the way is my liver. Because again, I'm aware of the fact that at some point, someone, if we do like 4 in a year, someone's gonna be like, this is deeply not cool. And so we thought NBC was gonna say, you're never allowed to do it again, because we did one with Dua Lipa, who I absolutely adore. And like halfway through, she went to the bathroom and her manager was like, she'll be out in 5 minutes. And then they said, she'll be out in 10 minutes. And then they were like, Dua went home. So I was like, oh, I feel like just the legal team at NBC is going to be like, we can't do this anymore. But fortunately, they've allowed us.
So speaking of Rihanna, last time we spoke, it was during the pandemic, so we did this remotely.
Yes.
And if you recall, I asked you who your dream guest was, if there was someone you were dying to book, and you told me it was Rihanna, and these are your words. She is my Academy Award. I won my Oscar. I'm done.
Yeah.
So my question to you is there someone else out there that you're dying to book, or is Rihanna still the queen?
She's still the queen. My thing was, she was always the dream guest, and then you don't want to get your dream guest and then like just act like you get a whole new dream. But again, we have some people coming up. Anytime you get a guest for the first time when you're in, your 11th season, it's really exciting. I would really like Conan to come on the show, because Jimmy obviously, is right downstairs and he's been on the show. We were lucky enough to have Letterman come on the show for the 10th anniversary of the franchise he started. And so Conan would sort of complete the trio of the people who did such a good job hosting the show that it was there for me when my time came.
One of the things that your show is known for is debuting talent as they make their first appearance on late night, right?
Yes.
So are there any memorable guests that you'd like to single out that made their debut on the show this past year?
I don't know if it was this past year, but, Tim Robinson, who, was a colleague of mine at SNL, who has the wonderful show I Think You Should Leave, and is in the great movie Friendship now. We were his first late night show. It is always exciting, when you have young comedians. Quinta Brunson, we had Quinta on when she was just someone who, was doing really funny, memes online and had just written a book. And we sort of thought, oh, this is an interesting person. And, and so it's really nice to have a relationship with someone like that. But in general, we have a great talent department, and they're always keeping their eyes out for people. And they, when they come to me and say, hey, there's this new thing, and we think they're going to be really great, and we want to give it a shot, I always just take their word for it.
What would you say is the show's greatest achievement this past season, and then overall?
Overall, I would say that we have this family of people that have worked on the show for a very long time. We do not have a ton of turnover on our show, and while I regret that means not as many people get to come through and experience what I think is a really cool place to work. Like, we're just so happy to have people we know and trust, and it does feel like a family. And when things like a writer's strike happens, the worst part is just being away from everybody. And then I would say just the achievement this season is, look, you don't have to watch my show for more than like 30 seconds to kind of see where I might land on politics. And so, when the election results happened, we had this real sense of dread, because it felt like a replay of a thing we'd already done before that we thought was never going to happen again. And so I'm really proud of the fact that we found a tone in dealing with it that is cathartic for us to do, and hopefully cathartic to watch, which is that we're going to continue to be frustrated by everything. We're not going to sugarcoat how bad things are, but we are going to try to talk about it in a way that is joyous, because you cannot let anyone take your joy away. Like, once that happens, you are truly dehumanized. So we just try to be excited to do our show every day. It's a privilege, and even when we're talking about things that make us unhappy, we try to do it in a way that makes us happy.
And
thank you.
Going back to your staff and your crew, what would you say you value most about them?
No one. I think if people think they can solve the problem without asking, they just do it. And I think because our show moves so quickly, we try to minimize like just busy work meetings where sometimes if you set a meeting, people will ask a question just to talk in the meeting. And we have built a world where everybody knows Shoemaker's door is open and my door is locked with a sign that says, "Go see Shoemaker." But people have learned to only come to us with a problem if they on their own can't solve it. And we put a lot of faith in our department heads. You know, we have, the people who do our set design, the people who do our wardrobe. You know, we never go to them and say, like, we want to switch it up with shirts. We just trust their instincts.
So as you are aware, there's a number of residents in our audience today, and they're often curious about your journey, how you got to where you are.
Yes.
So I have a few questions that, for you to share some insight about who inspires you, that sort
Great.
of thing. So who or what inspired you to want to pursue a career in the comedy entertainment business?
Comedy, I always say, that, and my brother agrees, like I think the reason we thought comedy was a good thing to do is that my mom literally laughed at everything my dad ever said. And she's way better looking than he is. And so I just think we thought that's how you marry above your station. I should know that about 10 years ago, she stopped laughing at literally anything he said. Which heartbreaking, but I think she was just like, one day she woke up, she's like, "I'm laughed out, Larry. I'm laughed out."
What's the best piece of advice as it pertains to your career that you've ever received?
My dad weirdly, my dad's a finance guy, and for a very funny man, he had a very dry, career insofar as how it appealed to me. But he was a manager of people, and the thing he always said is, treat the people that do the best work for you. You have to treat them really well so that they want to keep working with you. Share credit. Or even just completely give it away, because ultimately, the people that work for you have the right to feel as much esteem about the work you're doing that you do. And also, never, when something goes wrong, there are often times where, it's due to other people making a mistake, but you should always start by looking at the piece you played and what went wrong, because that's the one you're most likely to be able to change the next time out.
That's excellent advice. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
What voice in comedy did you most admire growing up?
I think Steve Martin. It was really fun, even as a young person, to realize that he was different. There was something, rebellious and sort of punk rock about the way that he was sort of making fun of stand-up comedy while doing stand-up comedy. And then, my parents love Monty Python. We watched a lot of early SNL. But yeah, my dad, we had a lot of comedy albums on vinyl, and it was, Steve Martin and it was Richard Pryor, and those were the ones we listened to the most. I remember, in fact, another parent called my dad and said, "Hey, when you drive my kid to school, will you not play the Richard Pryor album?" Which was, when you, looking back, is shocking he did not know that.
How did you start out before you found success in the business?
What was I doing? Mm-hmm. I was lucky because I went to school in Chicago, and I had started while I was there, Northwestern University, Go Cats, if there's any Cats here. And then while I was at Northwestern, I started taking improv classes in Chicago, and I was sort of on the improv track, and then my best friend, Pete Gross, and I saw this audition notice for this theater in Amsterdam called Boom Chicago that was started by American comedians, and we auditioned for it. We moved so pretty quickly. I was I think I was only 6 months out of college. I was living overseas, doing comedy full time, getting a lot of reps. That was the most important thing. I think I was doing 200 shows a year, and when you were living in Chicago, you were lucky if you went up once a week, and it was an incredibly important part of my development. And the people, it was sort of crazy looking at it now. The people that I worked with over there are also just having incredible careers. Jason Sudeikis and Brendan Hunt, Joe Kelly, who created Ted Lasso, were all over there when I was there. Kay Cannon, who's a wonderful director. Ike Barinholtz, who's so funny on the studio right now, Sal Stapperstein. My brother, Amber Ruffin, who's a writer on my show. So it was really a lucky time to be in a place where there was a lot of young talent. And so that was the first big step.
Wow. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given your younger self?
People ask me this all the time, and here's the thing. I think my younger self was so stupid that if I went back and gave him advice now, he'd fuck it up. And I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now. That's the last thing I want to mess with, is giving that dummy advice. Like, the fact that he helped me get here is a miracle, and I would not want to flap those butterfly wings.
So, and then adding on to that, there's some people in our audience today who are aspiring writers who are trying to get their foot in the door, whether it be, writing in film or trying to get a job as a staff writer. What insight or guidance would you give them?
I have no insight as to how to get jobs, but I would tell you the most important thing about starting in writing and being a writer is hang out with other writers. They shouldn't be too hard to find, especially here, but get to be friends with 2 or 3 writers. They don't even have to be like friends where you want to hang out and get dinner and stuff, but just share your writing with somebody. And the main thing I would say about comedy writing is be with people where you can say it out loud, because all comedy writing, when you hear it out loud, should be shorter. But you don't know that. When you write it, you're falling in love with it, and you're like, each line in your mind as a writer is funnier than the next, and then you say it out loud and you're like, oh, rough. Look, everybody, I'm sure this room knows, writing can be so solitary and so lonely, and it's always going to be that. It's always going to be like you against the page. So just knowing other writers is just the most important connections you can have.
What do you typically think about right before the show begins?
I genuinely think this is so nice. Mostly because when the show starts, I kind of stop thinking about everything else. It is maybe the most sort of zen moment in my day. And also, we have a screen backstage which just has the number of episodes. And it's so funny because I remember early on, it would say episode 23, and I'd be like, 22 wasn't great, but maybe. And now, we're in the 1600s, and it just is beyond. I can't wrap my head around how many shows we've done. And yet I get to stand in the same place, and I get to walk out on the same stage, and again, I'm in the same building, coming up on 25 years. I think they might give me a watch. Did they give me what did you get, Shu? Nothing? What did they give you after 25 years? A bike? You picked a bike? No wonder you got knee surgery. I'll give you my watch for your bike.
What's your vision going forward for next season?
It's not in a wonderful way. It's not a show where you plan, what are we going to do next year? We don't even know what we're going to do. We're on hiatus right now. We go back on Monday. There's no plan for Monday, other than, because anything we would write now, you'd have to throw out. Right. And so it's great. It almost, even though the show is written, you have to have that improviser's spirit of let's just wait for the world to give us an initiation and then move as quickly as we can to process it. And it's been great because even at SNL, after a bad SNL, I would definitely be in sort of a real depression hole until you could go back and do another show. With this show, when we're not doing it, I'm not thinking about the last one. This show makes me very present in my life and allows me to sort of, when I'm off, I can be with my kids, and when I'm on, I get to be on the show. So it's great.
And my final question is, what is the one thing that makes Late Night with Seth Meyers unique from all of the other late night shows out there that you would like Emmy voters to consider?
Oh, man.
One thing.
I think Emmy voters, like anyone before they take a vaccine, should do their own research. But the only thing that was sarcastic. Now I'm a little worried. Look, here's the thing, and it's the people who work at the show make it unique, and ultimately, I'm so lucky that I have all these people, and they appreciate that the show's the best when I can walk out and just focus on the show. and they just put out so many fires that I don't ever have to worry about, and it just keeps me merry in the moment, which is, I think, what makes the best talk show.
Well, thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for being us.
Thank you, everybody.